Whitney Houston's voice was not simply good. Music critics widely regarded it as one of the most technically proficient instruments in popular music history. Her 1985 debut album sold over 25 million copies worldwide, according to Nielsen SoundScan data. By 1992, her rendition of I Will Always Love You had become the best-selling single by a female artist ever recorded. Yet within 2 decades, that same voice would be silenced in a hotel bathtub, her body discovered alone, her legacy forever shadowed by what came after the fame. Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born August 9, 1963, in Newark, New Jersey, according to birth records cited in biographies by Mark Bego and Jeffrey Bowman. She was raised in a family steeped in gospel music. Her mother, Cissy Houston, was an accomplished gospel singer who performed backup for Aretha Franklin and Elvis Presley. Her cousin was Dionne Warwick. From childhood, Houston was surrounded by professionals who understood the music industry's demands and its dangers. Clive Davis, founder of Arista Records, signed Houston in 1983 after watching her perform at a nightclub, as he recounts in his autobiography, The Soundtrack of My Life. Her first album produced 3 number-one singles on the Billboard Hot 100. Rolling Stone described her vocal range as spanning 3 octaves with technical precision rarely heard in pop music. By age 23, she had won her first Grammy Award. The trajectory seemed unstoppable. Robert Beresford Brown, known professionally as Bobby Brown, was born February 5, 1969, in Boston, Massachusetts. He rose to fame as a member of the R&B group New Edition before launching his solo career. His 1988 album, Don't Be Cruel, sold over 12 million copies, according to RIAA certifications. Brown cultivated a bad boy image that stood in stark contrast to Houston's carefully managed public persona. They met at the 1989 Soul Train Music Awards, witnesses reported in contemporaneous press accounts. Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown married on July 18, 1992, at Houston's New Jersey estate, as documented in marriage records and media coverage from People magazine and other outlets. The ceremony took place during the peak of Houston's commercial success. The Bodyguard soundtrack would be released just months later. Friends and colleagues later told biographers they had concerns from the beginning. Robin Crawford, Houston's close friend and creative director, reportedly questioned the compatibility, according to Crawford's 2019 memoir A Song for You. Bobbi Kristina Brown was born March 4, 1993, the couple's only child together, according to hospital records cited in legal documents. Houston's mother Cissy later wrote in her 2013 memoir Remembering Whitney that the pregnancy seemed to stabilize Whitney temporarily. The birth was covered extensively by entertainment media. Photographs from that period show Houston appearing radiant and devoted. For a brief window, it seemed the marriage might provide the family foundation Houston had long spoken of wanting in interviews. By the mid-1990s, Houston's public appearances began to draw scrutiny. Entertainment journalists noted weight fluctuations in what the New York Times described in a 1996 concert review as diminished vocal stamina. Houston herself later acknowledged in a 2002 interview with Diane Sawyer that drug use had begun during this period, though she did not specify exact dates. Friends who spoke to biographers after her death placed the onset of serious substance abuse around 1995 or 1996, coinciding with increasing marital strain. Police records from suburban Atlanta, where the couple resided, document multiple domestic disturbance calls to their Alpharetta home between 1995 and 2003. While no arrests resulted from most incidents, the frequency, at least 7 documented calls, according to reports compiled by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, suggested chronic volatility. Neighbors interviewed by police, according to incident reports later obtained through public records requests, described shouting matches audible from the street. Both Houston and Brown publicly denied physical abuse in interviews during this period. On December 4, 2002, ABC aired Diane Sawyer's interview with Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown. An estimated 15 million viewers watched, according to Nielsen ratings. Houston appeared gaunt, her speech patterns seemed erratic. When Sawyer asked directly about drug use, Houston made a statement that became infamous: "Crack is cheap." I make too much money to ever smoke crack. Let's get that straight. Okay? We don't do crack. We don't do that. Crack is whack. The interview, rather than quelling rumors, intensified public concern about her health. Houston's 2002 album Just Whitney sold fewer than 3 million copies worldwide, according to SoundScan data, a dramatic decline from her previous releases. Concert cancellations became frequent. A 2000 performance in Hawaii was cut short when Houston appeared unable to complete songs, the Honolulu Star-Bulletin reported. Her longtime record producer Clive Davis told biographers he repeatedly urged Houston to enter rehabilitation. By 2004, Houston had not released new music in 2 years, the longest gap of her career. In 2005, Bravo aired Being Bobbi Brown, a reality television series documenting the couple's daily life. The show ran for 1 season, totaling 11 episodes. Critics and viewers expressed shock at what was broadcast. The Hollywood Reporter called it a portrait of dysfunction. Footage showed Houston using profanity, appearing disoriented, and engaging in bizarre behavior that seemed far removed from her once polished image. Houston later told Oprah Winfrey in a 2009 interview that participating in the show was the biggest mistake of her career. Whitney Houston filed for legal separation from Bobbi Brown on September 13, 2006, citing irreconcilable differences, according to court documents filed in Orange County Superior Court in California. The divorce was finalized on April 24, 2007. Houston was awarded primary custody of their daughter Bobbi Kristina, then 14 years old. In the divorce settlement, details of which were reported by People magazine, Brown received no spousal support. Houston's publicist released a statement saying she was moving forward with her life. In 2009, Houston released I Look to You, her first studio album in 7 years. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, selling over 300,000 copies in its first week, according to SoundScan. Reviews were cautiously optimistic. The Associated Press noted glimpses of her former glory but also a voice that has been through trauma. Houston embarked on a world tour to support the album. However, concerts in Australia were particularly troubled. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that Houston appeared to forget lyrics and struggled with pitch. Despite the divorce and professional re-emergence, Houston's battle with addiction continued. Multiple sources, including her brother Michael Houston, who spoke to Oprah after Whitney's death, stated that she had entered rehabilitation facilities at least 3 times between 2004 and 2011. However, Michael acknowledged that she never stayed long enough. Photographs from 2011 showed Houston looking frail. That year, she entered outpatient treatment in May, according to reports from TMZ and other entertainment outlets, but completed the program and was released. In February 2012, Whitney Houston traveled to Los Angeles for pre-Grammy Award festivities. She checked into the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Beverly Hills on February 9, according to hotel records cited in the coroner's investigation. She was scheduled to attend Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy Gala on Saturday, February 11. Multiple witnesses, including hotel staff interviewed by investigators, reported seeing Houston in the hotel lobby and pool area in the days prior. She appeared in good spirits, some said, though others noted she seemed tired. On the afternoon of February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston's personal assistant entered her 4th-floor suite at the Beverly Hilton at approximately 3:35 p.m. Pacific Time, according to the timeline established by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. Houston was found submerged, face down in the bathtub, unresponsive. The assistant called hotel security. Beverly Hills Fire Department paramedics arrived at 3:30 p.m., sources differ slightly on exact timing, and began resuscitation efforts. At 3:55 p.m., Whitney Houston was pronounced dead. She was 48 years old. The Los Angeles County Coroner released its official autopsy report on March 22, 2012. The cause of death was listed as accidental drowning. However, the report identified effects of atherosclerotic heart disease and cocaine use as contributing factors. Toxicology results, detailed in the report, found cocaine metabolites, marijuana, the anti-anxiety medication Xanax, the muscle relaxant Flexeril, and the allergy medication Benadryl in her system. No alcohol was detected. Chief Coroner Craig Harvey stated at a press conference that the cocaine use resulted in a cardiac event that caused Houston to lose consciousness. News of Houston's death spread rapidly. Within hours, her name was trending worldwide on Twitter and other social media platforms. Tributes poured in from across the music industry. Mariah Carey, Celine Dion, Dolly Parton, and countless others released statements. President Barack Obama said in a written statement, "Whitney was one of the world's greatest pop singers of all time." Flags at Houston's home state of New Jersey were lowered to half-staff by order of Governor Chris Christie. The loss resonated far beyond celebrity gossip. It felt, to many, like the final chapter of a preventable tragedy. Bobbi Kristina Brown was 18 years old when her mother died. She was at the Beverly Hilton that day, preparing to accompany her mother to the evening's gala. According to police reports, she had to be sedated after learning of the death and was briefly hospitalized. In the weeks that followed, Bobbi Kristina made public statements on social media expressing profound grief. "I'm doing as good as I possibly can," she tweeted. Those close to her, including grandmother Whitney Houston, expressed concern for her emotional state. Nicholas Gordon was taken into the Houston household as a teenager, according to family accounts. Whitney Houston informally considered him a ward, though she never legally adopted him, court documents later clarified. Gordon and Bobbi Kristina grew up together. In 2012, shortly after Whitney's death, the two publicly announced they were in a romantic relationship, posting photographs on social media. The relationship alarmed family members. Whitney Houston told People magazine she did not approve. Bobby Brown also expressed opposition, according to statements his attorney released to media. By 2014, friends and family members were publicly voicing alarm about Bobbi Kristina's well-being. Photographs posted to her social media accounts showed dramatic weight loss. In March 2014, she tweeted, "I'm doing as good as I possibly can, guys," but insiders told People and Us Weekly that she was struggling with substance abuse. Police in Roswell, Georgia, where she lived with Gordon, were called to their residence multiple times in 2014 for domestic incidents, according to police logs obtained by local media. The pattern was disturbingly familiar. On the morning of January 31, 2015, Nick Gordon and a friend discovered Bobbi Kristina Brown face down and unresponsive in a bathtub at her Roswell townhome, according to the police report filed by the Roswell Police Department. Gordon called 911 at approximately 10:17 a.m. Paramedics arrived and initiated CPR. She was transported to North Fulton Regional Hospital. The date was eerily close to the anniversary of Whitney Houston's death, nearly 3 years to the day. The location, a bathtub, was identical. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Bobbi Kristina Brown never regained consciousness. She was placed in a medically induced coma at North Fulton Hospital, then transferred to Emory University Hospital, and finally to a hospice facility. She remained in that state for nearly 6 months. Meanwhile, the Roswell Police Department opened a criminal investigation. Authorities stated they were treating the incident as suspicious. Investigators found marijuana and alcohol in the home, according to search warrant documents. A bruise was noted on her face, though its origin was not determined. Nick Gordon refused to meet with investigators, his attorney confirmed. On July 26, 2015, Bobbi Kristina Brown died at Peachtree Christian Hospice in Duluth, Georgia. She was 22 years old. The Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office released its report on March 4, 2016. The manner of death was listed as undetermined, but the report noted that she was found in a bathtub with her face submerged in water and that underlying cause of death was immersion associated with drug intoxication. Marijuana and alcohol were found in her system. Morphine, a breakdown product of heroin, was also detected, though the examiner noted it could have been administered medically. In June 2015, while Bobbi Kristina was still alive, her court-appointed conservator filed a civil lawsuit against Nick Gordon in Fulton County Superior Court. The lawsuit alleged that Gordon had given Bobbi Kristina a toxic cocktail, then placed her face down in a bathtub. It further alleged a pattern of violence and theft of her money. Gordon's attorneys denied all allegations. In November 2016, after Gordon failed to appear for multiple court dates, a judge entered a default judgment against him, awarding Bobbi Kristina's estate $36 million in damages. Despite the civil judgment, Nick Gordon was never criminally charged in connection with Bobbi Kristina Brown's death. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office cited insufficient evidence to meet the criminal burden of proof. In a statement, prosecutors said, in view of the medical examiner's conclusion that the cause and manner of death were undetermined, it would be difficult to meet the burden of proof in a criminal prosecution. Gordon maintained his innocence. He died on January 1, 2020, at age 30, from a suspected heroin overdose, according to the medical examiner in Seminole County, Florida. The parallels between Whitney Houston's death and her daughter's are haunting in their specificity. Both were found unresponsive in bathtubs, face down in water. Both deaths involved a combination of drugs, though the specific substances differed. Both occurred in environments where those who might have intervened were present or nearby. The medical examiner for Los Angeles County ruled Whitney's death accidental. The Fulton County examiner could not determine the manner of Bobbi Kristina's death. The dates were separated by just over 3 years. The outcomes were tragically identical. Bobby Brown's culpability in both tragedies has been widely debated. He was married to Whitney for 15 years, a period that coincided with her steepest decline. Multiple sources, including Houston's family members, have blamed Brown for introducing her to harder drugs, though Brown has denied this. In his 2016 autobiography, Every Little Step, Brown wrote, "I'm not the reason she's gone." After Bobbi Kristina's death, Brown faced another wave of public blame. He issued a statement saying he was struggling to make sense of it all. Critics argued that the chaos of his relationship with Whitney had set the stage for Bobbi Kristina's troubled life. Research on substance use disorder has consistently shown both genetic and environmental transmission. The National Institute on Drug Abuse estimates that genetics account for 40 to 60% of addiction vulnerability. Growing up in a household where addiction is present dramatically increases a child's risk. Bobbi Kristina witnessed her mother's struggle from childhood. She was exposed to domestic turbulence, public scandals, and the normalization of substance use. Experts interviewed after her death, including addiction psychiatrist Dr. Drew Pinsky, noted that she faced a perfect storm of risk factors: genetic predisposition, environmental exposure, and unresolved trauma. In the years since both deaths, cultural commentators have re-examined how the public and media treated Whitney Houston during her decline. Tabloid coverage was often cruel, focusing on her appearance and erratic behavior rather than the disease of addiction. The 2018 documentary Whitney, directed by Kevin McDonald, presented evidence of childhood sexual abuse that Houston had never publicly disclosed but had confided to close friends. Trauma specialists argue that untreated trauma is a significant predictor of addiction. The question many now ask: could compassion and intervention have altered the outcome? Whitney Houston's vocal range, technical skill, and emotional expressiveness made her a once-in-a-generation talent. Music historians frequently rank her among the greatest singers ever recorded, alongside Aretha Franklin and Ella Fitzgerald. Her influence on subsequent generations of vocalists, Beyoncé, Christina Aguilera, Mariah Carey, is unmistakable. But her final decade was marked by canceled tours, declined invitations, and unfulfilled potential. When she died, she was in the early stages of planning a comeback. Studio time had been booked. Songs were being written. The future was, briefly, open again. Bobbi Kristina Brown's life was shaped by tragedy before she could fully define herself. She expressed interest in pursuing music and acting, appearing in the reality show alongside her parents and later discussing recording plans. But she was also known primarily as Whitney's daughter, living under the weight of public expectation and private grief. She was 22 when she died, an age when most are just beginning adult life. Friends who spoke after her death described her as sweet, funny, and deeply loyal. They also acknowledged she never had the chance to escape the shadow of her mother's fame and her parents' dysfunction. Whitney Houston's estate was valued at approximately $20 million at the time of her death, according to probate filings. Her will, written in 1993, left everything to Bobbi Kristina. The estate was to be distributed in increments at ages 21, 25, and 30. Bobbi Kristina received the first portion shortly before her own death. After Bobbi Kristina's death, the estate passed to Whitney's mother Cissy Houston and her two brothers, according to the revised will terms. The estate continues to generate revenue from music sales, licensing, and the 2022 biopic I Wanna Dance with Somebody. Despite everything that came after, Whitney Houston's voice remains untarnished. Recordings from her prime Greatest Love of All, I Will Always Love You, her rendition of the national anthem at the 1991 Super Bowl, are regularly cited as vocal masterclasses. Music educators use her performances to teach breath control, phrasing, and emotional delivery. Streaming numbers remain robust. Her catalog has been streamed billions of times across platforms. Each year, new listeners discover her work. The tragedy of her life does not erase the beauty of what she created. Addiction specialists emphasize that substance use disorder is a treatable medical condition. The National Institute on Drug Abuse reports that effective treatment exists, combining behavioral therapy and, when appropriate, medication. Whitney Houston entered treatment multiple times but, according to family, did not complete programs. Early intervention, sustained support, and removal from enabling environments are critical. Whether Houston's outcome could have been different remains unknowable. What is clear, experts say, is that addiction requires the same rigorous, sustained treatment as any chronic disease, something Houston, for reasons complex and personal, never fully engaged with. Public health experts stress that cycles of addiction and trauma can be interrupted, but doing so requires systemic support. Access to quality mental health care, destigmatization of addiction, and robust family intervention programs have all been shown to reduce intergenerational transmission. Bobbi Kristina's death underscored the failure of those systems in her case. She had resources, financial means, access to treatment, but not, it seems, the structure or support to use them effectively. Advocates argue that her story should serve as a case study in how wealth alone cannot overcome untreated trauma and addiction. Media scholars have critiqued the role tabloid journalism played in both tragedies. Paparazzi photos of Houston at her lowest were sold for large sums and published widely. Reality television, including Being Bobby Brown, turned private dysfunction into public entertainment. After Bobbi Kristina's hospitalization, some outlets published intrusive, speculative stories that were later criticized as exploitative. The Columbia Journalism Review noted in a 2015 article that coverage often prioritized sensationalism over sensitivity. The question persists: does public interest justify the invasive documentation of private suffering? Whitney Houston and Bobbi Kristina Brown are buried together at Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey, according to cemetery records. The gravesite has become a pilgrimage destination for fans. Visitors leave flowers, notes, and mementos. The headstone bears both names. In death, as in life, they are inseparable, mother and daughter, two lives ended too soon, linked by love and by tragedy. The inscription, chosen by family, reads simply, "I will always love you." It is both a tribute and an epitaph for a bond that neither fame nor dysfunction could sever. Many questions surrounding both deaths remain unresolved. What exactly happened in the hours before Whitney was found in that bathtub? Why was Bobbi Kristina alone with Nick Gordon despite family concerns? Could earlier, more aggressive intervention have saved either of them? Investigators, family members, and journalists have offered theories, but certainty is elusive. What is documented is this: two women, bound by blood and love, died in eerily similar circumstances. The specifics may never be fully known. The outcome is a matter of public record. Whitney Houston's influence extends beyond music. She broke barriers as a black woman dominating pop radio in the 1980s and 1990s. Her success paved the way for artists like Beyoncé, Rihanna, and Alicia Keys. Scholars of popular culture note that her crossover appeal challenged industry norms about race and genre. Yet her story also serves as a cautionary tale about the costs of fame, the dangers of untreated addiction, and the vulnerability of those who grow up in the public eye. She is remembered for both her artistry and the tragedy that consumed her. One of the saddest elements of Bobbi Kristina Brown's story is how little she was known apart from her parents. Media coverage almost always identified her as Whitney Houston's daughter or Bobby Brown's daughter. Her own interests, personality, and aspirations were rarely centered. Friends describe a young woman who loved animals, enjoyed photography, and dreamed of making her own mark. But those details were drowned out by the spectacle of her family drama. In death, she risks being remembered solely as a footnote to her mother's tragedy, rather than as an individual who deserved a full life. Whitney Houston's last public performance took place on February 9, 2012, at a club in Hollywood, just 2 days before her death. Witnesses reported that she sang "Yes, Jesus Loves Me" informally, her voice raspy but recognizable. Video footage circulated online after her death. It is difficult to watch a shadow of the voice that once commanded arenas. Earlier that week, she had rehearsed for an appearance at the Grammy Awards, according to reports, though those plans never materialized. The contrast between the power she once wielded and the frailty evident in those final days is stark and heartbreaking. If there is a lesson to be drawn from these intertwined tragedies, it is this: talent and wealth do not immunize anyone from the ravages of addiction and trauma. Both require treatment, vigilance, and compassion. The stigma that surrounds addiction often prevents people from seeking help or receiving adequate support. Families in crisis need intervention, not judgment. Public figures struggling with substance use deserve the same dignity and access to care as anyone else. Whitney and Bobbi Kristina's deaths are not merely celebrity gossip, they are case studies in systemic failure, missed opportunities, and the human cost of untreated disease. More than a decade after her death, Whitney Houston's music continues to resonate. Her albums have sold over 200 million copies worldwide, according to industry estimates. She holds the record for the most consecutive #1 singles by a female artist. The 2022 biopic brought her story to a new generation. Museums, including the Grammy Museum, have hosted exhibits on her career. Her voice, powerful, precise, deeply emotional, remains a benchmark. The tragedy of how her life ended does not diminish what she achieved. It does, however, underscore the fragility of even the most extraordinary among us. Whitney Houston and Bobbi Kristina Brown, mother and daughter, both possessed of beauty, both loved by millions, both lost to circumstances that should have been preventable. Their deaths, separated by 3 years and occurring in such chillingly similar fashion, form a narrative almost too painful to comprehend. Yet their story must be told, not for spectacle, but for understanding. It is a story of talent squandered, of systems that failed, of a cycle that was never broken. It is a reminder that behind every headline is a human being, and that tragedy, once set in motion, can echo across generations. In the end, we are left with recordings, photographs, and memories, evidence of what was and what might have been. Whitney Houston gave the world a voice that transcended genre and generation. Bobbi Kristina Brown was given a life that should have been full of possibility. Both were taken too soon, under circumstances that continue to provoke questions and sorrow. Their story is not just about fame or addiction, it is about the limits of love in the face of disease, the vulnerability of the human spirit, and the steep price of untreated pain. May their memory serve not only as tribute, but as a call to do better for those still struggling, still suffering, still in need of the help that came too late for Whitney and Bobbi Kristina.